Hi, greetings, fellow trekkers and trekkers. Well, look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 5 now continues on with Doctor Bashir, I presume. One day in the bar, Ram is working up the courage to finally ask Lita on a date. However, this is something Ram has been trying to do for weeks without any success, leaving Quark doubtful his brother will actually go through with it. Indeed, when Lita, who herself has feelings for Ram and is simply waiting for him to ask her out, comes over from her shift at the double wheel, Ram instantly loses the little courage he had somewhat in bolts. Lita worries that there's something wrong with her, and Quark does little to reassure her before sending her back to work. Meanwhile, over a game of darts, Dr. Bashir and Chief O'Brien discuss Lila's efforts to spend more time with his daughter Molly to ensure she doesn't feel left out due to the attention focused on her new baby brother. However, the discussion is suddenly interrupted by Dr. Louis Zimmerman, Director of Holographic Imaging and Programming at Jupiter Station, who was looking for Bashir. He tells Bashir that he intends to make him immortal. Later, Bashir and Zimmerman are in Captain Sisko's office discussing the reason for Zimmerman's visit to Deep Space Nine. The intern explains that he was the designer and template for the innovative emergency medical hologram, EMH, which is designed to provide short-term medical care in an emergency, with the capability to substitute for an entire medical staff, if needed, although Deep Space Nine doesn't have one due to it being incompatible with the station's Cardassian technology. Starfleet Society wants to expand the concept and create a program that can operate full-time on isolated outposts, such as space relay stations or research outposts or long-range exploratory vessels, relaying space at a premium, and the holographic doctor wouldn't be required to leave sickbay. Furthermore, Starfleet Medical has chosen Bashir to be the template for the new long-term medical holographic program, LMH. Zimmerman requests a list of technical modifications to the station, which Captain Sisko approves before telling Bashir how proud he and everyone else on the station is. Later, Zimmerman has Bashir filing an extremely long and detailed questionnaire which requests information on seemingly insignificant details of Bashir's life. Zimmerman explains that the LMH will need to interact with people for long periods of time, which might require funny stories or anecdotes from its life. Zimmerman also begins mapping Bashir's body for the LMH's physical template. Later, at Quark's bar, Zimmerman and Bashir are on the second level and watch over the double wheel where they see Lita. Zimmerman is instantly drawn to her, and Bashir explains that she is his ex-girlfriend. Zimmerman says add the list of people to be interviewed, mentioning that he intends to interview Bashir's family and friends. Odo arrives to close Bashir with regards to quarantine cargo that is holding up an Atenian freighter's departure. However, before he leaves, Julia explicitly requests that Zimmerman not contact or interview his parents as they are currently estranged. Zimmerman tells Bashir he understands. However, Julian's desire not to have his parents brought in has just made Zimmerman more eager to talk to them. In the infirmary, the LMH is activated. Bashir examines the holographic self and compliments the replica, although notes that he doesn't like the eyes. Zimmerman then activates the Deep Space Nine's new EMH and copies its database to the LMH. Soon, the LMH rejects the EMH, disparaging and not very likable. The EMH is quickly deactivated before he complained too much about his replacement. The Zimmerman explains that while the LMH is currently simply the EMH with a new skin, he wrote a completely new personality from scratch for it. Zimmerman then begins his interviews with several Bashir's colleagues, including Captain Sisko, Kira, Dax, Worf, Jake, and Morn, who just shrugs. During his interview, O'Brien immediately considers his friend to be an extraordinary person with many great qualities, although they make sure Bashir won't find out what he said. After the interview with Lita, Zimmerman asks the Bajoran woman out to dinner. That night, as the two share a meal, Rom was listening in from a distance. The lady interrupts the date to once again to ask Lita out, but again can bring himself to do an extending some lame excuse such as telling her he will fix her replicator, leaving both frustrated. The next morning, as Bashir and Captain Sisko discuss station business, Dax arrives with a surprise for Bashir, his parents, Richard and Amsha. Bashir is stunned and can only just continue his horror to see them, and sheepishly introduces them to Sisko. Richard begins waxing lyrical to the captain about his newest project as a landscape architect, as well as claiming to be the one who convinced his son, who he called Jules, to study medicine. Amsha tells Richard that they can talk to the captain later, while revealing they're here at Zimmerman's invitation. Bashir extricates himself and his parents from the office, promising to find them quarters. Afterwards, Bashir confronts Zimmerman and demands to know why they were summoned despite his request not to have them in any way involved in the LMH project. Zimmerman is completely unapologetic explaining that they were an important part of Bashir's background. Zimmerman is also busy on another, more personal project as he calls on Lita as she gets out of the shower. He tells her the manager of Jupiter Station Cafe has decided to quit, and he has put in a good word. As a result, Lita has been offered the job. Lita is so blown away she accidentally exposes herself to Zimmerman. As the doctor tells her that as well as coming to Jupiter Station, he makes clear he has serious feelings for her. Lita, unsure of what to do, tells him that she needs time to think. Bashir shares a very awkward dinner with his parents, and Sorcerer talks about the rudeness of the transport captain that brought them to the station, stating his own experience on shuttles. However, from the way Richard talks, it's clear he's remembering himself as being a shuttle captain when Julian points out he was a third-class steward for 6 months before he was dismissed, though Richard claims he resigned. Amsha tries to defuse the situation by asking her son about his research, but Richard is dismissive as he feels Julian should have remained on Earth, the one to practice frontier medicine. Julian brings up Richard's new career as a landscape architect. His old Bashir has always had a distinct lack of focus and real ambition instead of stumbling from one job to the next. The three start to discuss Zimmerman's upcoming interviews, and Julian tries to coach his parents not give any answers that leave any opening for Zimmerman to explore. It is made clear from their conversation that there is a dark secret at the heart of the family which could destroy Julian's career and land them all in a lot of trouble. Richard takes offense at what he sees as Julian's lack of respect or trust of them, causing Julian to angrily walk out, remarking this is why he has not visited them in 3 years. Ugh. In the Rebel-Mat, Lita tells Rom about Zimmerman's offer, ostensibly asking his advice, but she is clearly desperate for him to ask her to stay. Once again, Rom can't express himself clearly and ends up agreeing when Lita says she should take the job. Angry and upset with Rom, she leaves. Remorseful from the earlier argument, Richard goes to the holographic lab to apologize. Richard pledges to Julian, standing in befuddled silence, that he will never reveal the big secret that he was genetically enhanced, including with DNA resequencing, and they are part of their son and what he has become. Julian appears to accept the apology, and his parents leave, at which point O'Brien and Zimmerman appear. It's revealed that Julian was actually the LMH, who didn't recognize Julian's parents, and the two have just overheard the entire conversation. O'Brien immediately tells Bashir what has happened, leading to Letter being furious with the chief for setting up his parents. O'Brien explains that they were just testing the LMH's ability to deal with an unexpected situation. That's not important anymore. As now said, Zimmerman is now most likely going to report to Starfleet that Bashir is unsuitable to be the LMH model due to his suspected genetically enhanced background. Bashir knows immediately what this means for him too. Once Starfleet Medical is informed, he'll be discharged from the service and his license to practice medicine will be revoked, as according to Federation law, DNA resequencing is illegal for anything other than repairing serious birth defects. O'Brien is surprised to realize that what Bashir's parents said is true, and the doctor tells him the full story. When he was a small child, Bashir was having trouble keeping up with the other children his age and may even have had a learning or mental disability. He was as physically able as he should have been, while children around him were starting to learn to read. Bashir barely understood the world around him. Just before he turned 7, his parents took him to Adjudion Prime, where he was given several illegal treatments over a number of months to enhance his mental and neurological abilities. Eventually, they imparted the original Bashir that was left with his name, and when he returned to Earth, his parents moved to a different city and enrolled their son in a new school using false records, where he no longer struggled, but instead was a star pupil. No one's ever suspected anything. However, as far as Bashir is concerned, he is a fraud. O'Brien tries to convince his friend that his genetic enhancements aren't what gave him his compassion, ambition, or personality. He also points out that there hasn't been a case like this over a century, so there's no way to know how Starfleet will react. Bashir, however, is convinced that he'll be quickly drummed out of Starfleet and intends to resign his commission before Zimmerman files his report. O'Brien isn't ready to give up, but Bashir has accepted that this could happen and asks to be left alone. Meanwhile, Ron was pouring over his own woes with Quark as he laments that he didn't tell Lita how he felt. Quark has little sympathy, instead of reminding his brother of what happened with Prenadora when he entered a 5-year marriage contract so he could have a son, and how he instead fell in love with her and requested an extension. As a result of Rome not ready to find Print, Prenadora's father swindled him out of all his money, and Prenadora abandoned her husband and son for a richer man. Rom insists that Lita is not Prenadora, but as far as Quark is concerned, all females are exactly the same. Instead, he offers Rom Here's one of his Raise Your Halsey programs, Falcon Love Slave Part 2, The Revenge, to take his mind off Lita. Richard is determined to fight and save Julian's career, but Julian has already resigned himself to his fate. This leads to another argument between the two, as Julian thinks of himself like one of Richard's jobs. He didn't like the one he had, so he substituted for something he wanted more. He especially stops at being called Jules, telling Richard that he stopped using that name when he turned 15 and found out what had been done to him, and as far as he's concerned, Jules died in the hospital after his parents were too ashamed when he couldn't keep up. Amsha argues back against the accusation that they did what they did because of shame, speaking of the heartbreak she felt when she saw her young son trying his best but falling a little further behind each day while wondering if they'd done anything wrong. She convinces Julian that they did it out of love, not shame. Julian, accepting this, hugs his mother and then tells both his parents in the morning he's going to talk with Captain Sisko, resign his commission, and then leave the station quietly. The next morning, Bashir enters Captain Sisko's office and his parents already there, having told him everything. Also present is Rear Admiral Bennett, Josh Advocate General Starfleet, presiding over the matter via holoprojector. At this point, Bashir's parents both call his son Julian out of respect for who he is now, not who he was as a child. They explain that a deal has been reached. Bashir has taken full responsibility for everything, pleading guilty to genetic engineering, and will be serving 2 years in a minimum security prison in New Zealand. No mention of Julian's mother facing any criminal charges. In exchange, Julian can keep his commission and medical license. Julian starts to protest, but Ben explains exactly why genetic engineering is outlawed within the Federation, because for every Julian Bashir that could be created, there's a Khan Singh waiting in the wings. Julian accepts his father's sacrifice, and Ben tells Richard to report immediately to him upon his return to Earth. Sisko decides to leave the family alone. At the airlock, Bashir says goodbye to his parents and promises to visit more often. It's also time for Zimmerman and Lita to leave, when they hear a strange noise in the distance which is growing closer. They still find it is Rom, screaming for Lita to stay. The friend declares his love for Lita and asks her to stay, and this is all Lita needs as she returns his feelings and the two share their first kiss. Lita then apologizes to Zimmerman, but he accepts that he cannot stand to leave true love and decides to accept his life as one of solitude, until another attractive alien walks by. Zimmerman bids Lita and Rom goodbye quickly, before leaving to discuss the Kama Sutra with the new object of his affections. Back at Quark's, Bashir and O'Brien engage in yet another darts match. Bashir tries to thank O'Brien for what he said earlier, but O'Brien shrugs off the kind words for realizing that as Bashir's hand-eye coordination was also enhanced, he should be easily winning. Bashir admits to lowering his game a little to make it fair, and O'Brien demands that he instead play to his full ability. Bashir bites and quickly throws 3 consecutive bullseyes. Bar responds to that by doubling the distance from which Bashir must throw the darts in the future, promising a blindfold if that doesn't work. Wow. Anyway. So let's take a look at a note about the title of this episode. The title of this episode is reference to the famous quote, Dr. Livingston, I presume, spoken by Henry Morton Stanley in 1871. Stanley was a reporter sent by the New York Herald to find Dr. David Livingstone in Africa. Livingstone was a missionary explorer who had lost contact with the outside world over 6 years. When Stan found Livingston, he greeted him with those now famous words. Coincidentally, this episode was directed by David Livingston. Wow. So let's take a look at some production notes about this episode. After Jimmy Dix pitched the story for this episode, he didn't hear back from the producers for over a year. When he did eventually call for Ronald D. Moore, he thought it was a friend playing a practical joke on him, and he made Moore prove who he said he was. According to Chase Masterson, and now take the scene when Dr. Zimmerman boards his transport and propositions an alien woman, Robert Picardo changed his lines to, "Have you heard about my work on Star Trek Voyager?" Wow, that is really funny. Anyway, so let's take a look at some trivia surrounding this episode. This is the first appearance of Dr. Louis Zimmerman, the creator of the emergency medical hologram, as a real person in a Star Trek series, having previously appeared as a hologram on the Star Trek Voyager episodes Projections and The Swarm. He appeared again in Lifeline. Lita and Rom finally get together in this episode. They first become friends in bar association, and Lita confesses her feelings for Rom in Let He Who Is Without Sin. This episode is the first to write any details whatsoever about Nog's mother, Prinadora. Indeed, it is the only episode to do so. She would be much again if Frankie loved songs, but no new information would be presented. Dr. Louis Zimmerman was named for Herman Zimmerman, a production designer for TNG, DS9, and the 4 TNG movies. This episode is the last time that we see the holocommunicator being used until either Shinzon or the USS Enterprise E's version of it in Star Trek Nemesis. The footage of starships docked at Deep Space Nine in the final shot of this episode is recycled from The Way of the Warrior. The footage is reused again as Sacrifice of Angels. Despite Bashir's claim that O'Brien scored a triple 20 in the darts game at the beginning, the darts are grouped near to the board's center, below the triple 20. And now finally, let's take a look at a continuity note. O'Brien remarks that Starfleet has not dealt with a genetically engineered officer in 100 years. A possible explanation for O'Brien's statement would arrive in Equality of Mercy and Ad Astra Prospera, when in 2259 Commander Una Chin Riley is exposed for Illyrian genetic modifications, arrested, and nearly expelled from Starfleet. So overall, I think this is a pretty interesting episode, and yeah, it's also kind of unique that we got to learn a little bit more about Dr. Bashir's backstory and stuff, so yeah. So overall, I give Dr. Bashir, I presume, 4 warp cores out of 5. Anyway, tune in as we till the next episode, A Simple Investigation. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.